Hi, I'm Trevor Rawson, founder of Authentic Life Financial Planning. In this video, we're discussing the differences between holding and selling your RSUs. All right, last thing that I'm going to cover today is holding versus selling, and again, my general philosophy on how much stock you should hold in your employer. So, when it comes to selling versus holding, I'm not going to cover the taxes and the tax owed too much. I'm really going to focus on the risks that I see of selling versus holding. So, when it comes to selling, really the main risk is FOMO, right? The fear of missing out on greater returns if you stayed invested in your company stock. FOMO is real, right? Like FOMO exists. It's obviously a risk, and really it's the risk of future regret, right? Like that's really what psychologists would call it, is the risk of future regret. But it is absolutely real and something to just be aware of as you're making selling or holding decisions. When it comes to the holding side, the two main risks are individual stock risk and concentration risk. And I'll talk about both because I think it's important. So individual stock risk essentially is the risk that your company does not perform as well as a diversified alternative. Ultimately, with an individual stock, we have no idea what it's going to do. It could go up, it could go down, it could stay flat, it could go bankrupt. We really have no idea what will happen with an individual stock. Whether it's short-term or long-term, we have no idea. With a diversified alternative, again, we don't know what will happen, especially over the short term. We have no idea what's going to happen. But when it comes to a diversified portfolio, we do know that there's really no risk of it going bankrupt. There's really no risk, if we think of, the possible outcomes, right? Bankruptcy or going to the moon, with an individual stock, both of those possible realities exist, right? That doesn't really exist with a diversified portfolio. When we think of it, if this is the margin of, possible returns with an individual stock, with a diversified version, it basically just shrinks, right? Like it's not going to go to zero. It's not going to go bankrupt. If it is, it's an apocalypse and meteor crash is happening, or World War III is happening, and it's going to zero. And at that point, it doesn't really matter anyways. But it's also a diversified alternative is never going to go so crazy high that, you become rich overnight. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be much more muted than the possible returns of an individual stock. And so that's essentially the risk with an individual stock, is that it goes to zero. With concentration risk, that essentially is individual stock risk magnified, right? And I'll talk more about kind of how I think about company stock and how it should fit into your overall financial plan. But really with concentration risk, it's the risk of your individual stock holding becoming such a large portion of your portfolio that it's going to affect the long-term and the short-term goals that you have. And that's what we want to try to avoid. And so switching gears a little bit, or maybe jumping off to talk about how I view company stock and when I think company stock is too much, it really comes down to that concentration risk question. So I'm a believer in, making sure that, again, your long-term and short-term goals are going to be okay, regardless of what happens with your company stock. And so the way that I kind of help clients understand whether or not they have too much company stock basically follows this 5-step formula. So first, we have to understand what you own. We have to understand what you own today and what you'll own 3 months from now, 6 months, a year from now, whatever, based on what equity you've been awarded. The second step is understanding the tax, especially with RSUs. We have to understand what the value of the awards are, as well as what the taxes will be owed on those awards. We need to understand that because you're never getting the full grant value, right? Like it's always going to be a little bit less after taxes are paid. So once we understand the tax, then we can start planning for any near-term goals. Are you going to be buying a house soon? Are you going to take a sabbatical? Are you going to buy a car? Are you going on some big trip that you need to have cash for? Well, then you need to have the cash to be able to pay for those things, right? We don't want to rely on your company's stock to do well to make those near-term goals happen. Getting back to the tax conversation before, again, we can't assume that your taxes, or excuse me, your company stock will be able to pay the taxes when they're due. We cannot plan for that. We have to plan to have cash available for those near-term goals, including the tax. Once we've kind of figured out what the near-term goals are and confirm that there's either cash or cash flow able to cover those goals, then we have to start thinking about the long term. And ultimately what I do for my clients is say, okay, let's say your company's stock goes to zero. It just does not work out. You don't have any more RSUs. It's done. It does not work for you. What does the long term look like in that situation? And is that long-term projection at a point where you're comfortable with how much stock you own? Or do we need to start paring some of it back and reinvesting it in a diversified version that we can trust will do well? Now, that may sound really conservative, or it may sound like, I'm scared of you holding individual company stock. The reality is absolutely not. I'm very comfortable with my clients owning their company and continuing to hold their company stock. But we have to make sure that the long term is going to be fine regardless what happens with your company stock price. We cannot rely on that. So we have to plan for that to go to zero. Once we've done that, then it just comes down to, okay, do you want to diversify further? What's the plan with the RSUs that we have going forward? Are we going to sell them? Are we going to let them vest? What's the plan? Are we going to do some combination, right? Essentially, any strategy we have with equity comp awards, there's going to be shades of gray. It's not an all or nothing thing. It's not, are you going to hold everything or are you going to sell everything? There's gradients to that. There's a spectrum to that. And essentially, once we get through these first 4 steps, then it's like, okay, where do we go from here to make sure that the long term is going to look just fine based on that? Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and drop a comment below with any questions or topics that you would like to see covered. Financial planning is all about creating the life you want. Let's build it together.